What's up, football fans? This is Big Al on this Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. Welcome to fall and welcome to week 2 in the NFL, the week that was. And this was a crazy week. We had 7 games on the schedule that were decided by 5 points or less. One of those games was an epic comeback by one team. We'll tell you all about that. And there were some major injuries to some big name players. And one team was especially hit with the injury bug. We'll tell you all about that. Plus, my week 3 power rankings are coming at the end, so stick around through the whole video for that. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and comment. Subscribe to my channel if you like these football updates and all that good stuff. And smash that like button, or smash that bell, I should say, twice, and get notified every time I go live. Alright, let's dive into the week that was in the National Football League. Week 2, 2020. Starting off with Thursday Night Football and the Battle of Ohio. As the 0-1 Cleveland Browns, led by 2018 number 1 draft pick and former Heisman Trophy winner from Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield, played host to the 2020 number 1 overall draft pick and former Heisman Trophy winner out of LSU, Joe Burrow and his Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns were ranked number 20 in my week 2 power rankings, while the Bengals were 27th. Alright. Everyone thought that this was going to be a blah game, but it was pretty entertaining, as Cleveland wins a high-scoring affair by a final score of 35-30. So the Browns get off the schneid. They're 1-1. Next up, they host the Washington football team back in Cleveland on Sunday, while the Bengals fall to 0-2, and they'll travel to Philadelphia to face the Eagles. Browns are coming off the whooping they received from Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, while the Bengals had their chances to beat the Chargers, but a late pass interference call and a missed field goal thwarted those chances. Alright, so let's jump into the numbers. For the Browns, Baker Mayfield was 16 of 23, completing 69.6% of his passes for 219 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and a quarterback rating of 110.6. He also carried the ball 3 times for 5 yards. Nick Chubb had a great game. 22 carries, 124, and 2 touchdowns rushing, plus 1 catch for 9 yards. Kareem Hunt found the end zone not once, but twice. He had 10 carries, 86 yards, and a rushing touchdown, plus 2 receptions for 15 yards and a receiving touchdown. Odell Beckham Jr., 4 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown. Jarvis Landry, 3 grabs for 46. Tavir Thomas led the Browns defense with 9 tackles, and Andrew Sendejo, 7 tackles for solo. For the Cincinnati Bengals, the aforementioned Joe Burrow, making his second career NFL start, was 37 of 61, completing 60.6% of his passes for 316 yards, with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, and a very respectable quarterback rating of 90.6. Burrow also had 19 yards on 7 carries. Joe Mixon was pretty much held in check by the Browns' run defense, held to 46 yards on 16 carries, but he also had 40 yards on 4 catches. Tyler Boyd Tyler Boyd, 7 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Drew Sample, 7 catches, 45 yards. CJ Ozuna had 4 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown before he tore his Achilles tendon. He's now out for the season. Mike Thomas, 4 receptions, 31 yards, and a TD. William Jackson III led Cincinnati's defense with 4 tackles, 3 solo, 1 pass defense, and an interception. The Cleveland Browns offense ran 58 plays, totaling 434 yards. They had 219 passing yards and 215 rushing yards, so the balance of run and pass was pretty much evenly distributed for the Cleveland Browns. They had 23 first downs. They were 5 of 8 on third down conversions, hitting 62.5%, and 1 for 2 on fourth down, 50%. The Cleveland defense recorded 52 tackles, 28 solo tackles, with 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 7 passes defensed, no interceptions, and no defensive touchdowns. The Browns continue to get hit with the laundry, though. They were flagged 8 times for 76 yards. Time of possession was 26 minutes and 21 seconds. For Cincinnati, they finished with 353 yards of offense and ran 85 plays. They threw for 285 yards and was held to just 68 rushing yards. The first down advantage goes to the Bengals. They had 30. Third down conversions, they were 8 for 18 at 44.4%. But a perfect 5 for 5 on fourth down. That's awesome. The defense had 60 tackles, no sacks, no forced fumbles, 1 pass defense, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. Cincinnati was only flagged 4 times for 45 yards. Time of possession was 33-39, so the Bengals won in that category. Closing line was the Browns -6. Closing margin was 5 points. The final over-under total was 44.5. Both teams combined to score 65 points, so that shot past the 44.5 point total. Total yards by both teams was 787 on 143 offensive plays. I picked the Browns to win straight up 27-20 over the Bengals. And I got that pick right. But I picked Cleveland to cover the 6 points, which they did not, winning by just 5. So I lost that ATS pick. And I'll also tell you how I did in my straight up picks and my picks against the spread after we go through all the games. And let me tell you that I did well in one area. In fact, I did very well in one area and not so well in the other. Stick around to the end and find out where I did well and where I did not. All right, moving to the Sunday afternoon portion of the schedule. Starting off with the Atlanta Falcons, ranked number 25 in my power rankings in week 2. They're fresh off of a 38-25 loss at home to Seattle, in which the Falcons did get 3 receivers over 100 yards. They traveled to Dallas to play the 10th ranked Cowboys. Dallas was less than stellar last Sunday night against the Rams in Los Angeles, losing 20-17. Mike McCarthy was pretty much out-coached by Sean McVay in that game. The Dallas Cowboys trailed by 19 points at halftime. In fact, they were down 20-0 early in the third quarter before rallying back and beating Atlanta 40-39. The Cowboys go to 1-1, and they will visit the Seahawks in Seattle on Sunday afternoon, while the 0-2 Falcons return home to host the Chicago Bears. Dak Prescott was 34 of 47, completing 72.3% of his passes for 450 yards with 1 touchdown and no picks. He had a 109.4 quarterback rating. And talk about making things happen with your legs. Yeah, he was held to just 5 carries for 18 yards, but he scored 3 rushing touchdowns. All right, Ezekiel Elliott, workhorse numbers again, 22 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. 6 receptions for 33. Rookie wide receiver CeeDee Lamb had 6 catches for 106. Amari Cooper, 6 catches on 9 targets for 100 yards. And Dalton Schultz, another rookie for Dallas, had 9 grabs for 88 yards and his first NFL touchdown. Jalen Smith led the Dallas defense with 8 tackles, 3 solo, 1 pass defense. Joe Thomas had 6 tackles, and Trayvon Diggs had 6 tackles, including a pass defense. For the Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan was 24-36, completing 66.7% of his passes for 273 yards, 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and a 126.3 quarterback rating. So he had a better quarterback rating in this game than Dak Prescott. Matty Ice also ran 4 times for 16 yards. Todd Gurley II had 21 carries but was held to 61 yards. So that's less than 3 yards per touch. Calvin Ridley targeted 10 times, caught 7 passes for 109 and 2 touchdowns. Hayden Hurst, 5 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets. Russell Gage, one of the 3 Atlanta receivers over the century mark in receiving yards last week, held in check this time. 6 receptions for just 46 yards, but he did score a touchdown. DeMonte Kazee led Atlanta's defense with 7 tackles, 6 solo. And Foye Oluokun, 5 tackles, 4 solo, including 3, count them, 3 forced fumbles. Yeah, Dallas was pretty sloppy with the football, especially early. The Dallas Cowboys ran 80 offensive plays and totaled 570 yards, 445 through the air, and 125 on the ground. They had 33 first downs. Third down conversions were 7 of 13 for 53.8%. Fourth down conversions were 0 for 2. The defense logged 48 tackles, 17 solo, with 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 4 passes defense, no interceptions or defensive scores. Dallas was flagged 7 times for 75 yards, time of possession 26 minutes, 12 seconds. The Atlanta Falcons ran 71 plays on offense, totaling 380 yards, 267 passing and 113 rushing. They had 22 first downs, converted 8 of 17 on third downs for 47.1%, and they were a perfect 2 for 2 on fourth down conversions. The defense had 56 tackles, 29 solo, with 1 sack, 5 forced fumbles. Yeah, that's not a typo. 5 forced fumbles for the Atlanta Falcons defense. Because as I said, Dallas was pretty careless with the football early. They also have 4 passes defense, no interceptions, and no defensive scores. Atlanta was flagged 8 times for 51 yards. Time of possession was 33 minutes and 48 seconds. Closing line was Dallas minus 2.5. Of course, the margin ended up being 1 point. Over under in the game was 54. And with both teams scoring 79, that shot well over the total. And this was the highest scoring game and the highest offensive output in terms of total yards, as the Falcons and Cowboys combined for 151 offensive plays, totaling 950 yards and 79 points. I picked Dallas to win this game 31-21. So that's 2 for 2 on my straight up picks. I also picked Dallas to cover the 2.5 points at close, but they didn't, winning by just that 1 point. So that's a loss. All right. Next up is the Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. The Bills, ranked number 8 in my power rankings, took care of business against the New York Jets, while the Dolphins, ranked number 26, played very closely with Cam Newton and the Patriots last week in Foxborough, only to come up 10 points short. Buffalo wins this one 31-28 in a game that was much closer than anyone else expected. The Bills are 2-0, and next up they will host the Los Angeles Rams in Orchard Park on Sunday, while the Dolphins, not a lot of time to dwell on this one. At 0-2, they travel to Jacksonville to face the in-state rival Jaguars Thursday night. All right, Josh Allen had himself a game. He was 24-35, completing 68.6% of his passes for 417 yards. That's a career high. He had 4 touchdown passes, also a career high, and no interceptions. And he had a robust 147 passer rating. Allen also had 4 carries for 18 yards. Devin Singletary, 10 carries, 56 yards, 2 receptions for 20. Zach Moss, 8 rushes, 37 yards, 1 catch for 7. Stephon Diggs, 8 receptions for 153 and a touchdown, his first as a Bill, and he was targeted by Josh Allen 13 times. John Brown, 4 receptions, 82 yards on 6 targets. He also caught a touchdown in this game. Cole Beasley, 5 receptions, 70 yards. Both Gabriel Davis and Reggie Gilman had a receiving touchdown as well. Levi Wallace paced Buffalo's defense with 7 tackles, 4 solo, and 1 pass defense. For the Miami Dolphins, Ryan Fitzpatrick, 31 of 47, completing 66% of his passes for 328 with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions and a 100.3 passer rating. Fitzpatrick also carried the ball 3 times for 12 yards. Myles Gaskin, 7 carries, 46 yards, 6 receptions for 36. Matt Breida, former 49er, 7 carries, 37 yards, 1 reception for 2. Mike Gesicki, 8 catches, 130, and a touchdown. He was targeted 11 times by Fitzpatrick. Isaiah Ford, 7 catches for 76. Devontae Parker, 5 receptions for 53 yards and a TD. Nick Needham had 6 tackles to lead Miami's defense. And Kyle Van Noy, former Patriot, had 4 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 1 pass defense. The Bills ran 58 offensive plays and totaled 524 yards, 413 passing, and 111 rushing. They had 23 first downs. They were 5 for 10, 50% on 3rd down, and they had no 4th down attempts. The defense recorded 50 tackles, 30 solo, with 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 8 passes defense, no interceptions or defensive scores. Buffalo was flagged 6 times for 53 yards. Time of possession was 28 minutes, 55 seconds. The Miami Dolphins ran 70 offensive plays, totaling 410 yards, 311 passing, and 99 rushing. They had 28 first downs, 5 more than the Bills. They were 5 for 12 on 3rd down conversions at 41.7%. On 4th down, they were 0 for 1. The defense had 36 tackles, 6 solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 3 passes defense, no interceptions, no defensive scores. The Fins were penalized 3 times for 20 yards. Time of possession was 31 minutes and 5 seconds. Closing line was Buffalo minus 5.5. Closing margin was 3 points. Final over-under total was 42.5. They scored 59 points, the Bills and Dolphins did, and pushing this game well over the final total. This game had the second highest offensive output in terms of total yards at 934 across 128 offensive plays. I picked Buffalo straight up 27-17, so now I'm 3-0 on my picks, but I'm 0 for 3 against the spread after taking Buffalo to cover the 5.5 points, in which they've only won by 3. All right, moving on to the Carolina Panthers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Panthers coming in number 28 in my power rankings, coming off a heartbreaking loss at home to the Las Vegas Raiders, while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ranked number 12th. Did not exactly look sharp in Tom Brady's first game in Tampa, which was a 34-23 loss to the Saints at the Superdome. But Tampa Bay righted the ship on Sunday and beat the Panthers 31-17. Tampa Bay goes to 1-1. Their next stop is Denver, where the Bucs will face off with the Broncos, and this is one of the few cities in where Tom Brady has struggled. Historically, Tom Brady does not play well at Mile High. Carolina is now 0-2, and next Sunday they will travel out to SoFi Stadium to face the Los Angeles Chargers. Not sure whether or not Tyrod Taylor or Justin Herbert will start that game. We'll see what happens during the week. As for the Bucs, Tom Brady was 23 of 35, completing 65.7% of his passes for 217 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception, finished with an 80.3 passer rating. Leonard Fournette had 12 carries for 103 and 2 rushing touchdowns, plus 4 receptions for 13. Ronald Jones II, 7 rushes, 23 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions for 4. Mike Evans, 7 receptions, 104 and a TD. He was targeted 10 times. Justin Watson, 2 receptions, 48 yards on 3 targets. David White led the Tampa Bay defense with 11 tackles, 7 solo, 1 pass defense. And Ndamukong Suh, 4 tackles, 3 solo, and 2 sacks. He had himself a game. For Carolina, Teddy Bridgewater was 33 of 42, completing 78.6% of his passes. Threw for 367. He had no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And those picks, especially when you don't throw touchdowns, drag down your quarterback rating as it did for Bridgewater. Finished with a rating of 83.2. All right. Christian McCaffrey, this is big news here. He had 18 carries for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns, and in 4 rushes for 29 yards. He left this game in the 4th quarter with an ankle injury and will have an MRI on Monday, according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. So that means this past Monday being yesterday. We're not sure how. In fact, yeah, we do. He had his MRI yesterday, Christian McCaffrey did, and it turns out it was an ankle injury, and he will be out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So now the Panthers will have to make do without Run CMC for the next month and a half. Big blow for them. Robbie Anderson, 9 catches, 109 on 10 targets. Mike Davis, 8 receptions, 74 yards on 8 targets. DJ Moore, 8 catches for 120 on 13 targets. Rasul Douglas led the Carolina defense with 7 tackles, while Tahir Whitehead had 4 tackles, 2 solo. Tampa Bay ran 57 offensive plays, totaling 339 yards, 217 passing and 122 rushing. The Buccaneers had 20 first downs. Finished 5 of 11 on third down conversions, that's 45.5%. Fourth down conversions, none. The defense recorded 55 tackles, 33 solo, with 2 forced fumbles, 5 sacks, 5 passes defense, and 2 interceptions with no defensive scores. Tampa Bay was flagged 5 times for 37 yards, time of possession, a meager 25 minutes and 28 seconds. Carolina ran 66 plays on offense, totaling 427 yards, 340 passing, and 87 rushing. They had 24 first downs. Third down conversions were 6 of 11, 54.5%. Fourth down conversions 1 for 2, 50%. Defense had 33 tackles, 10 solo, no sacks, no forced fumbles, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. The Panthers were penalized 9 times for 77 yards, time of possession 34 minutes and 32 seconds. Closing line was Tampa Bay minus 7.5, margin was 14, over under at close was 46.5. The two teams combined for 48 points, so this game finished just over the 46.5. The two offenses combined for 766 yards and 123 offensive plays. I picked Tampa Bay to win this game 34-17, so I nearly got the final score right across the board. I got Carolina's 17 points right. So now that makes me 4-0 straight up, and this is the first win against the spread in week 2, as I also had Tampa Bay covering the 7.5 points. All right, next up is the Denver Broncos at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Denver ranked 23 in my week 2 power rankings, fresh off of last Monday night's loss at home to the Tennessee Titans, where bad clock management did them in. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers also played on Monday night, but they won, beating the New York Football Giants. The Steelers come in number 9 in my power rankings for week 2. Pittsburgh wins this one 26-21. They go to 2-0 on the season, and next up they will host the Houston Texans, while the 0-2 Denver Broncos return home to play Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Big Ben Roethlisberger, 29 of 41, completing 70.7% of his passes, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 98.7 passer rating. James Conner, 16 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown, 2 receptions for 15. Deontay Johnson, 8 receptions, 92 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 13 times by Ben. Chase Claypool, 3 grabs, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Juju Smith-Schuster, 7 receptions, 48 yards on 8 targets. Mike Hilton led Pittsburgh's defense with 8 tackles, 1 sack, 1 pass defense. Devin Bush, alma mater from Devin Bush from the University of Michigan, go blue. 6 tackles, 5 solo, 1 pass defense. And then J.J. Watt's younger brother, T.J. Watt, had 3 tackles, 2 solo, and 2.5 sacks. I think he's got to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Week for week 2. Let's see. Drew Lock started this game for the Denver Broncos. He was 1 for 5, just 20% of his passes completed for 20 yards with no touchdowns or interceptions. He had a 43.8 passer rating when he left the game in the first quarter with a shoulder injury, and he will be sidelined the next 2 to 6 weeks. So Jeff Driscoll will be taking Drew Lock's spot as the starting quarterback, at least for the next month. Driscoll was 18 of 34, completing 52.9% of his passes for 256 yards with 2 touchdowns and 1 pick. and an 84.9 passer rating. He also had 2 carries for 5 yards. Melvin Gordon, 19 carries, 70 yards, 2 receptions for 14, and a touchdown reception. Courtland Sutton, 3 receptions for 66 yards before he left the game, complaining of cramps. He also had a knee problem as well. Rookie receiver Jerry Jeudy had 4 catches for 62 yards. Noah Fant, 4 catches, 57, and a touchdown. Justin Simmons led Denver's defense with 7 tackles, 6 solo, 2 passes defense, and the 1 interception on Big Ben. The Steelers recorded 410 yards of offense on 64 plays, with 301 yards passing and 109 rushing. They had 19 first downs. They struggled in late down situations, however. Just 2 for 12 on third down conversions, 16.7%, and 1 for 2 on fourth down, 50%. Pittsburgh's defense had 47 tackles, 30 solo, with 7 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 6 passes defense, and 1 interception, and no defensive scores. Steelers were hit hard by the penalty flag, penalized 10 times for 89 yards. Time of possession was 29-29. For the Broncos, they had 319 yards of offense on 65 plays, 215 passing yards, and 104 rushing. They had a first down advantage in this game, 23 versus the Steelers' 19. They too struggled on third down conversions, just 5 of 15 for 33.3%. Fourth down conversions, 0 for 2. The Bronco defense had 49 tackles, 40 solo tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 5 passes defense, 1 interception, and no defensive scores. Denver was flagged 4 times for 30 yards. Time of possession was 30 minutes, 31 seconds. So this was pretty close as far as time of possession goes. Favors the Denver Broncos in this game. Closing line was Pittsburgh minus 6.5. Margin was 5 points. Over under at close was 40.5. The two teams combined for 47 points, so this game finished over the total. The two teams combined to run 129 offensive plays, totaling 729 yards. Picked the Steelers to win straight up 26-17, so now I'm 5-0 straight up, but against the spread. I fall to 1-4 because I also had the Steelers covering the 6.5, and they only won by 5 points. So now that puts me at 1-4 ATS in week 2. All right, next we got the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. The Lions come in 24th in my power rankings, and they're fresh off of last Sunday's disastrous loss to the Chicago Bears, in which the Lions blew a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter and allowed Mitch Trubisky to come back and score 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns and still won at Ford Field. The Packers look very impressive against the Minnesota Vikings, putting up NFL highs in points with 43 and yards with 522 in their win over the division rival Vikings. And on Sunday, the Packers once again hang 40 on another division rival as Green Bay trounced Detroit 42-21. Now, the Packers did not look good early, trailing as they trailed 14-3 in the second quarter. So this was a come-from-behind win for the Packers. Green Bay, nonetheless, is 2-0. Next Sunday night, they face the Saints in New Orleans on Sunday Night Football, while the winless Lions at 0-2 traveled to Arizona to face the Arizona Cardinals. And I'll tell you how they did against the Washington No-Names a little bit later. Starting off with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, 18 of 30, 60% passes completed, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 107.6 passer rating. Also 2 carries for 12 yards. Aaron Jones went off. He had over 230 yards in this game. Carried the ball 18 times for 168 and 2 scores on the ground. That wasn't enough. He had 4 receptions for 68 more yards and a receiving touchdown. He was targeted by Aaron Rodgers 8 times. So add that up. That's 22 total touches for 234 yards for Aaron Jones. Nice game. Jamal Williams, 8 carries, 65 yards. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, known in Packerland as MVS, 3 receptions, 64 yards on 7 targets. Allen Lazard, 3 catches, 45 yards on 5 catches, or 5 targets, I should say. Devontae Adams targeted 3 times, made all 3 of his catches for 36 yards. Robert Tonyan, 2 catches, 25 yards and a TD. He was targeted 3 times. Christian Kirksey led Green Bay's defense with 10 tackles, 2 solo. And Rashawn Gary had 7 tackles and 1.5 sacks. For the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford was 20 of 33, completing 60.6% of his passes, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 19 passer rating, but rather a 91 passer rating. He also carried the ball once for 4 yards. Adrian Peterson, AP, had 7 carries for 41 yards. Kerryon Johnson, 8 carries, 32 yards and a TD. TJ Hawkinson, the second-year tight end from Iowa, had 4 receptions, 62 yards on 4 targets. Marvin Hall, 1 catch, 24 yards on 2 targets. And Marvin Jones Jr., 4 catches on 8 targets for 23 yards. Both had a receiving touchdown. DeAndre Swift, 5 carries, 12 yards, 5 receptions on 5 targets for 60. Rookie Jeff Okudah led Detroit's defense with 7 solo tackles, while Jamie Collins Sr., another former Patriot and Bill Belichick disciple, 4 tackles, 3 solo, and 1 sack. The Packers finished with 488 yards of offense, 229 passing, and a whopping 259 rushing. The Pack had 26 first downs. They finished 50% on 3rd down at 6 for 12 and 1 for 1 on 4th down. The defense had 37 tackles, 22 solo, 4 sacks, no forced fumbles, 4 passes defense, 1 interception, and they also had an interception return for a touchdown by Charlton Sullivan. Green Bay was flagged 8 times for 60 yards. Time of possession was 34 minutes, 46 seconds. Those 488 yards by the Packers came on 65 offensive plays. The Lions offense ran 54 plays and finished with 307 yards. 218 passing and 89 rushing. They had 19 first downs. They were also 6 for 12 on 3rd downs, which is 50%, and 0 for 1 on 4th down. Detroit's defense had 45 tackles, 27 solo, 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 4 passes defense, and no interceptions. The Lions were flagged 7 times for 70 yards. Time of possession, just 25 minutes and 14 seconds. Closing line was Green Bay -6. Margin was 21 points. Over-under at close was 51. The 2 teams combined to score 63, so this game finished over the final total. Total yards were 795, over 119 plays. I picked the Packers to win this game 35-23, so that makes me 6-0 straight up. And I also had Green Bay covering the 6 points, which they do easily. Putting me at 2-4 against the spread. That's the first page of our report. Now to page 2. Starting off with the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. Well, Minshew Magic was in the air in week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts as he went 19 for 20 while throwing 3 touchdowns in the process in that upset win against Indianapolis. They traveled to Nashville to face the Tennessee Titans, who despite their kicker, Stephen Gostkowski, missing 3 field goals, ended up winning. Ironically enough, on a field goal, 16-14 last Monday night. Tennessee comes in at number 5 in my power rankings, Jacksonville 30th. Tennessee wins this game 33-30 and moves to 2-0 on the young year. And next Sunday, they're off to the Twin Cities to face the Vikings. The 1-1 Jaguars will return home to play the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. All right, starting off with the Titans. Ryan Tannehill, 18-24, completing 75% of his passes, 239 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 145.7 passer rating. Well done. He also carried the ball 4 times for 12 yards. Derrick Henry had 25 carries, but was limited, and I use the term loosely, limited to just 84 yards. Jonnu Smith, 4 receptions, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was targeted 5 times. Adam Humphries, 5 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown. Corey Davis, who had that 101-yard receiving game last Monday night against Denver, held to 36 yards on 3 catches on Sunday with a touchdown pass. He was targeted 5 times. Kenny Vaccaro led the Tennessee defense with 10 tackles, 9 solo tackles, 1 sack, and 2 passes defense. Meanwhile, Malcolm Butler, that Malcolm Butler who picked off Russell Wilson in the Super Bowl a few years ago as a Patriot. 8 tackles, 5 solo, and 2 passes defense. For Jacksonville, Gardner Minshew II, not 19-20, but still pretty good. 30-45, converting 66.6% of his passes, 339 yards, another 3 touchdown passes. But he also threw 2 interceptions, which dropped his passer rating to 92.7. Minshew also carried 4 times for 19 yards. James Robinson, 16 carries, 102, and a rushing touchdown, 3 receptions for 18. DJ Chark Jr., 4 receptions, 84 yards. Keelan Cole, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 58 yards. Tyler Eifert, 3 receptions, 36 yards, and a touchdown. Chris Thompson, 3 receptions on 4 targets for 20 yards and a TD. Andrew Wingard led Jacksonville's defense with 7 tackles, 5 solo. Miles Jack, 6 tackles, 1 solo, and 1 pass defense. Tennessee Titans ran 58 offensive plays, finished with 354 yards, 231 passing, 123 rushing. They had 23 first downs. Third down conversions were not a problem for either team. Tennessee was 7 for 11 for 63.6%. Fourth down conversions and attempts, none. The defense had 48 tackles, 24 solo, with 2 sacks, no forced fumbles, 10 passes defense, and 2 interceptions, and no defensive touchdowns. Tennessee was flagged 4 times for 30 yards. Time of possession was 26-38. Jacksonville ran 72 plays on offense and finished with 480 yards, so they actually outgained Tennessee in this game. They had 315 passing yards, which also outgained the Titans, as did their rushing yards at 165. Jacksonville also had more first downs than the Titans. They had 30 versus 23 for Tennessee. they were hitting their third downs as well. 10 for 14 at 71.4%. That's the best in the NFL by any team in week 2. Fourth down conversions, 1 for 1. The defense at 45 tackles, 17 solo, with 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 2 passes defense, no interceptions or defensive touchdowns. Jacksonville was flagged 8 times for 60 yards. Time of possession was 33 minutes and 22 seconds. Closing line was Tennessee -7. Margin was 3 points. Over under at close 44.5. And these two division foes shot past that, scoring 63 points. So that game finished well over. Total offense by both teams was 834 yards on 130 total plays. Straight up, I took Tennessee in a much closer game, 24-20. That made me 7-0 straight up. And Jacksonville and I actually had Jacksonville to cover the 7 points. And they did so despite losing by those 3. So I get the win there, 3-4 against the spread this year. Next game, the Los Angeles Rams, number 17 in my rankings after last Sunday night's win against Dallas. They traveled to Philadelphia to face another NFC East opponent in the Philadelphia Eagles, who choked their game with the Washington football team away after leading 17-0 late in the first half. And then proceeded to get shut down by Washington's defense, which led to Carson Wentz being sacked 8 times and Washington winning the game in come from behind fashion, 27-17. The Rams are 17th in my Week 2 power rankings. The Eagles a couple spots down at 19. In fact, they had the biggest drop in my Week 2 power rankings. And it looks like the Eagles are going to drop a little bit further because they lose again 37-19. And the loss also ended a 6-game win streak in the series against the LA Rams. LA is now 2-0 as they travel to Buffalo on Sunday to face the Bills. And then the 0-2 Eagles now find themselves in a must-win situation as Joe Burrow and the 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals come to Lincoln Financial Field Sunday afternoon. So the loser of that game will be 0-3. If you're Philly, there's got to be some sort of sense of urgency when they come back out on Sunday afternoon. All right, starting off with the Los Angeles Rams. Jared Goff, 20 of 27, very effective. Completed 74.1% of his passes for 267 with 3 touchdown passes and no interceptions and a solid 142.1 quarterback rating. Goff also had 7 carries for 13 yards. Darrell Henderson Jr., 12 carries, 81 yards, and a rushing touchdown. 2 receptions for 40, so he had a 100-yard day. Malcolm Brown, 11 carries, 47 yards. Cooper Kupp, 5 receptions, 81 yards on 6 targets, 2 carries for 19. Star of this game by far was Tyler Higbee. 5 receptions on 5 targets for 54 yards, and he caught all 3 of Jared Goff's touchdown passes. Robert Woods, 2 receptions, 14 yards on 5 targets, so he kind of had a struggle catching the football. He also had 3 carries for 19 yards and a rushing touchdown. And on Saturday, Woods signed a 4-year extension with LA worth $65 million. So right before the game, Robert Woods got paid. 4-year extension for $65 million. So he'll be in Los Angeles for quite a while. Micah Kiser led LA's defense with 11 tackles, 6 solo tackles, 1 forced fumble, 1 pass defense. Troy Hill had 7 tackles, 6 solo, 1 pass defense, and an interception. And Darius Williams had a tackle, a pass defense, and an INT as well. For the 0-2 Eagles, Carson Wentz, he is not having a good year, is he? 26 of 43, completing 60.5% of his passes, 242 yards with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He finishes with a 56.5 passer rating. Wentz, however, did find the end zone. He had 2 carries for 7 yards and a rushing touchdown, so the news isn't all that bad. Or all bad, I should say. Speaking of news not being all bad, Miles Sanders, their starting running back, was back in the Philly lineup on Sunday. He carried 20 times for 95 yards and a touchdown, also had 3 receptions for 36 yards. So he was probably the only bright spot on this Philadelphia offense. Boston Scott, 4 carries for 19 yards, 3 receptions for 24. Eagles alum Deshaun Jackson, 6 catches on 9 targets for 64. Zach Ertz, 5 catches, 42 yards on 7 targets. And Jalen Reagor had 4 receptions for 41. Avonte Maddox led Philadelphia's defense with 8 tackles. Jalen Mills had 5 tackles for solo. And TJ Edwards had 5 tackles for solo as well. He also forced a fumble in this game. Alright, the LA Rams ran 66 offensive plays and totaled 449 yards on those 66 plays. 258 passing and 191 rushing. So they ran the ball at will against a Philadelphia front 7 that's usually one of the best in the NFL in stopping and run. In fact, they're elite, or they should be. But the Rams just ran all over them. LA had 30 first downs in this game. Third down conversions were 7 of 12 for 58.3%. Fourth down, 1 for 1. Defense had 46 tackles. All right, the defense had 46 tackles, 30 solo, no sacks, 1 forced fumble, 5 passes defense, 2 interceptions, no defensive touchdowns rather. Rams were flagged 4 times for 24 yards. Time of possession was 31 minutes, 13 seconds. Philadelphia ran 69 offensive plays, totaling 363 yards, 242 passing, and 121 rushing. So they were outgained pretty much across the board. First downs, Philadelphia had 25. Third downs, they were also 7 of 12 for 58.3%. So neither team had trouble converting third downs. Fourth down conversion continued to be a bugaboo for the Eagles. 0 for 1 and 0% in week 2. They are now 0 for 3 on their fourth down attempts so far in 2020. All right, the defense had 47 tackles, 31 solo with 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, no passes defense, no interceptions, or defensive touchdowns. Philadelphia was flagged 5 times for 30 yards. Time of possession was 28-47. Closing line, shockingly, was Philly minus 1.5. But going into the game, LA was favored in this game, but the closing line says Philly minus 1.5. Closing margin was 18 points. Final over-under was 45.5. The two teams combined to score 56 points. So that finished over the total. Offense was 135 total plays and 812 yards. I picked LA to win 28-23. So that made me 8-0 in my picks so far this year, straight up. But I had LA covering, but since Philly were the favorites at close, I ended up losing this pick. So I finished at 3-5. Or I go to 3-5 against the spread with that loss. Alright. Now the next game that I have on my list is the Giants and Bears. And I went out of turn and didn't realize it until I was writing it. So the next game up was the Minnesota Vikings at the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings were ranked number 15 in my power rankings, coming off the 43-34 loss at home to Green Bay. while the Colts were fresh off of their upset road loss at Jacksonville, in which Gardner Minshew shredded to an extent Indy's secondary to the tune of 19 of 20 completions and 3 touchdowns. The Colts were ranked 21st in my 2020 power rankings, but in my week 2 power rankings. Anyway, Indianapolis wins this game 28-11. The Colts go to 1-1. Next Sunday, they will welcome the New York Jets to Lucas Oil Stadium, while the 0-2 Vikings return home to face Ryan Tannehill, NFL Comeback Player of the Year for 2019, and the Tennessee Titans next Sunday at US Bank. The Colts were led by Phillip Rivers, 19-25, 76% of his passes completed, 214 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, passer rating of 97.8. Also 4 carries for 3 yards. Rookie running back from Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor, who will be seeing the bulk of the touches at running back for the Colts due to the season-ending injury, to Marlon Mack. He had 26 carries for 101 and a rushing touchdown, plus 2 receptions for 9 yards. Mo Alie-Cox, 5 receptions, 111 on 6 targets. Zach Pascal, 3 receptions, 19 yards, and a touchdown on 4 targets. And T.Y. Hilton had 3 receptions, 28 yards, and 5 targets. Kenny Moore II, 5 tackles, 4 solo, 2 passes defense, 1 interception. Darius Leonard, 5 tackles, 4 solo. Kari Atkins, 3 tackles, 1 pass defense, and 1 interception. And DeForest Buckner came over from the San Francisco 49ers in the offseason. 1 tackle, 1.5 sacks. For the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, not a good day. In fact, the Vikings had a bad day all around. Kirk Cousins was not good in this game. 11 of 26, 42.3% of his passes completed, 113 yards. That's it. He had no touchdowns and 3 INTs and finished with a passer rating of 15.9. Ouch. Dalvin Cook held to 63 yards on 14 carries. He did score a rushing touchdown. Cook also had 2 receptions for 8 yards. Justin Jefferson, 3 catches, 44 yards. Adam Thielen, 3 receptions, 31 yards. He was thrown to 8 times. Eric Kendricks led Minnesota's defense with 11 tackles, 10 solo. And then Holton Hill had 7 tackles and a sack. On a quick note for this game, the Colts franchise have never lost a home game against the Minnesota Vikings, whether in Indianapolis or Baltimore. After Sunday's win, the Colts are now 12-0 all-time at home against Minnesota. Want to throw that in there. The Colts ran 65 offensive plays, 354 yards, 203 passing, and 151 rushing. Indy had 24 first downs, third down conversions for a struggle not just for the Colts but for the Vikings as well. Indy was 3 of 11 for 27.3%, fourth down conversions 1 for 1. The Colt defense had 34 tackles, 23 solo with 3 sacks, no forced fumbles, 9 passes defense, and 3 INTs, and no defensive touchdowns. And the flags were coming often for the Colts. 9 penalties for 93 yards. Time of possession, 38 minutes, 25 seconds. So that makes them a ball hawk, the first of week 2. And again, a ball hawk is a team that possesses the ball for at least 35 minutes. So that put the Colts in that category at 38-25. As for the Minnesota Vikings, the offense was putrid. 44 offensive plays for 175 yards. Now, take those numbers. 175 yards, 44 offensive plays. That's 3.97 yards per play by the Vikings offense. So not even 4 yards a play by the Vikings offense. Terrible. 95 passing yards, that's it. 80 yards rushing, that's it. The Vikings also had just 12 first downs. So first downs were a 2-1 edge to Indianapolis. Third downs was much worse for the Vikings. 2 for 9, 22.2%, no fourth down attempts. The defense has 65 tackles, 49 solo, and 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 passes defense, 1 interception, no defensive touchdowns. Minnesota was flagged 6 times for 45 yards, and time of possession, not good. 21 minutes, 35 seconds. Well, when you only run 44 plays and only total 175 yards, which is not even 4 yards a play, don't expect to have the ball for long. Closing line was Indianapolis minus 3.5. Margin was 17. Over-under was 49. The two teams scored 39 points, so this was the first game on the board to finish under their closing over-under total. And offense was pretty much non-existent in this game, especially if you're the Vikings, as Minnesota and Indianapolis combined for 109 offensive plays and 529 yards. Yeah. I picked Minnesota, however, to win this game 24-20, and that's my first loss of the week. So that's 8-1 straight up, and now 3-7 against the. Make that 3-6 straight up against the spread, or 3-6 against the spread. I know what I'm trying to say. As the Colts win this one by 17 points. All right, now we're back on track. We got the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears. The New York Football Giants lost last Monday night to the Steelers. They are number 31 in my power rankings. Meanwhile, the Chicago Bears scored 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns, so erased a 17-point deficit in Detroit, and beat the Lions. Chicago was number 18 in my power rankings for Week 2. In fact, they had the biggest jump last week. And this was a defensive battle. You thought the Vikings-Colts game had no offense? This game didn't have any either. Chicago wins 17-13. The Bears start 2-0 for the first time since 2013. They're off to the ATL to face Matt Ryan and the Falcons next week, while the Giants at 0-2 will play host to the San Francisco 49ers. And we'll tell you how they did in their first visit to New York against the Jets right after we're done with this game. All right, Mitchell Trubisky, 18-28, completing 64.3% of his passes, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 78 passer rating. 4 carries as well for 16 yards. David Montgomery, 16 carries, 85 yards, 3 receptions, 45 yards on 3 targets. He also caught a touchdown pass. Cordell Patterson, 2 receptions, 8 yards, 7 carries for 25. Darnell Mooney, 3 receptions, 36 yards and a touchdown. And Allen Robinson III, from what I understand, has continued contract talks with the Bears over the weekend. He had 3 catches for 33 yards on 9 targets. Eddie Jackson and Roquan Smith paced the Bears' defense, both recording 7 tackles, 6 solo tackles. As for the New York Football Giants, Daniel Jones was 25 of 40, completing 62.5% of his passes for 241 yards with no touchdowns and 1 pick and a 68.9 passer rating. Jones also carried the ball 3 times for 21 yards. Dion Lewis, 10 carries, 20 yards, rushing touchdown, 4 receptions for 36. Golden Tate, 5 receptions, 47 yards on 5 targets. Darius Slayton, 3 receptions, 33 yards on 6 targets. Sterling Shepard had 2 catches for 29 yards before leaving the game with a toe injury, and he could miss several weeks. Evan Ingram, 6 catches, 65 yards on 8 targets. But the big injury news from this game is Giants running back Saquon Barkley. He had 4 carries for 28 yards before leaving the game in the second quarter with a torn ACL. He's done for the year. So just when you think that things couldn't get worse for the Giants, they have now gotten way worse, as they will be without Saquon Barkley for the remainder of 2020. Blake Martinez, who knows a thing or two about playing against the Bears, the ex-Packer, had 6 tackles, 4 solo, with 1 sack to lead the New York defense. Logan Ryan also has 6 tackles, 5 solo, and a forced fumble. Alright. The Chicago Bears ran 60 offensive plays for 304 yards with 169 passing and 135 rushing. They had 18 first downs. Third down conversions were pretty solid, 9 of 16, 56.3%. Fourth down conversions, 1 for 1. Defense had 46 tackles, 37 solo, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 5 passes defense, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. Chicago was flagged 5 times for 48 yards. Time of possession was 34-29. So they nearly got to ball hawk status with the TOP in this one. New York Giants, 295 yards on 58 offensive plays, 220 yards passing, and only 75 rushing. The Giants had 4 more first downs than the Bears. They had 22. Third down conversions were a struggle for New York. They were 3 of 13 for 23.1%. Fourth down conversions, 3 for 3. Defense had 56 tackles, 47 solo, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 6 passes defense, 4 of those coming from James Bradbury, 2 interceptions, and no defensive TDs. Giants were not flagged as much as the Bears were. 3 penalties for 20 yards. In fact, neither team didn't have many problems with the penalty flag. Time of possession was 25 minutes, 31 seconds. Alright, closing line was Chicago minus 4.5. Margin was 4 points. Over-under was 42.5. The two teams combined for 30 points, finishing under the total. So this was the lowest scoring game on the Week 2 schedule. Total yards was 599, and the two teams combined for 118 offensive plays. Straight up, I picked the Bears to win 24-17, so that makes me 9-1 with my straight up picks. And I also picked Chicago to cover the 4.5 points, which they do not. They came very close though, but still a loss. I am now at 3-7 in my straight up picks. Okay, we talked about some big name players getting injured. We told you about Christian McCaffrey being out 4 to 6 weeks with his injury. And we just told you about Saquon Barkley being lost for the year with a torn ACL against the Bears. And that brings us to our next game. The San Francisco 49ers at the New York Football Jets. And San Francisco had already been hit hard with the injury bug already. George Kittle did not play in this game. He got hurt last week. And then, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo, more on him in a second, he got hurt as well. And one key piece of this defense will not be on that front seven for the 49ers for the rest of the year. And your mind will be blown at who that is. We'll tell you all about that in just a second. But first, I can tell you the 49ers are number 7 in my Week 2 power rankings. They lost at home in an upset to the Arizona Cardinals last week, while the New York Jets at number 32 in my rankings were beaten soundly by Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. San Francisco won this game handily as expected, 31-13, but again, this may come at a price as many of their key names have been hurt. San Francisco gets their first win of the season. They're now 1-1. And this is just the first of 2 games at the Meadowlands. They will be back there this Sunday to play New York's other team, the Giants. As for the Jets, they are now 0-2. They hit the road next Sunday to face the Colts in Indianapolis. That said, let's take a look at that MASH unit known as the San Francisco 49ers. Starting off with Jimmy Garoppolo. He was 14 of 16, completing 87.5% of his passes, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a solid passer rating of 140.4, and then disaster strikes. Jimmy G leaves the game in the second quarter with a high ankle sprain. Niners coach Kyle Shanahan has him listed as week to week. So Garoppolo is now out for the rest of the game. In comes his backup, Nick Mullins. He was 8 for 11, completing 72.7% of his passes for 71 yards with no touchdowns and 1 interception. He finishes with a 51.7 quarterback rating. Raheem Mostert had 8 carries for 32 yards and a rushing touchdown and 2 receptions for 15 yards before he left the game with an MCL sprain, and he's more than likely will not play against the Giants this week. So it's quite possibly you could be without your starting quarterback, and it's more chances than none you will be without your starting running back if you're the 49ers. Yeah, this is bad. But there were some key players that avoided the injury bug, like Jarrett McKinnon, 3 carries, 77 yards, and a touchdown. Kendrick Bourne, 4 catches on 5 targets for 67. Jordan Reed, 7 catches on 8 targets for 50. Fred Warner led the San Francisco defense with 9 tackles, 6 solo. And then Jaquiski Tartt had 4 tackles. Now, as for that key defensive player that got hurt in this game, that's none other than Nick Bosa. He tore his ACL and he's out for the season. So that's 3 key pieces from this team. Your starting quarterback, he has a high ankle sprain. Your starting running back has a sprained MCL. He probably won't play next week against the Giants. And now add Nick Bosa to the list. He's done for the year after he tore his ACL. My oh my, I feel bad for the San Francisco 49ers. Man, that injury bug is hitting them in full force. As for the dumpster fire that is the New York Football Jets, Sam Darnold was 21 of 32, completing 65.6% of his passes for 179 with 1 touchdown and no picks and a 90.5 passer rating. Darnold also carried the ball twice for 7 yards. Frank Gore, former 49er. In fact, San Francisco was the team that drafted him from Miami way back in the day. He had 21 carries for 63 yards against his former team. Chris Hogan, who also played in the Bay Area collegiately at nearby Stanford, had 6 catches for 75 yards on 8 targets. Braxton Barrios, 6 catches, 8 targets, 59 yards, and a touchdown. Noel Hewitt led the New York Jets defense with 6 tackles. Brian Poole also had 6 tackles, plus a pass defensed. And Quinnen Williams, 4 tackles, 1 solo, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. The 49ers ran 56 offensive plays with 359 yards, 177 passing, 182 rushing. So the yards were pretty much evenly distributed by the Niner offense. They had 17 first downs. Third downs were not a problem for them. 7 of 13, 53.8%. No fourth down attempts. The defense had 41 tackles, 16 solo with 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 4 passes defense, no interceptions or defensive touchdowns. San Francisco was flagged 5 times for 59 yards. Time of possession was 32 minutes, 13 seconds. The Jets had 277 yards on 61 offensive plays, 173 yards passing and 104 rushing. New York also had 17 first downs, but unlike the Niners, they struggled with their third down conversions, just 35.7%, 5 out of 14. Fourth downs, 0 for 2, so late down situations, not good for the Jets in this game. Defense had 41 tackles, 23 solo tackles, along with 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 passes defense, and 1 interception, no defensive touchdowns. The Jets were also flagged 5 times, but for 65 yards. Time of possession was 27 minutes, 47 seconds. Closing line was San Francisco -7, margin was 18. Over-under was 41.5. Total points scored was 44, so this game finished just over the total. 2 teams combined for 636 yards of offense and 117 offensive plays. Straight up, I took San Francisco in a rout, 38-13. So this is another score that I nearly got right. So straight up, I go to 10-1. Against the spread, I go to 4-7, as San Francisco does cover the 7 points. And we have a plane or something flying over my house. That's what you were hearing in the background. All right, now to the late games on Sunday afternoon. Starting off with the Washington football team, who had that tremendous rally against the Eagles last week, in which they came back from down 17-0 to win 27-17. They were number 29 in my Week 2 power rankings, as they visited the desert to face Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, who were number 13 in my power rankings, and they're coming off an upset win in San Francisco against the reigning NFC champions. Well, Washington could not keep up the momentum from last week as they fall to the Cardinals 30-15. Arizona starts the year 2-0. It's their first 2-0 start since 2015. Of course, that year they made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. Next Sunday, they will host the Detroit Lions. And this is going to be the 3rd straight meeting in Arizona between the Cardinals and the Lions. Of course, Detroit won the meeting in 2018, and last year's game finished in a tie. The Washington No Names, meanwhile, fall to 1-1, and they're off to Cleveland to play the Browns next week. And for what it's worth, Washington is still in first place in the NFC East. They're tied with the Cowboys. Anyway, for the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, 26 of 38, completing 68.4% of his passes, 286 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He finishes with an 88.3 passer rating. But boy, he is really getting his kicks running the football, isn't he? He had nearly 100 yards rushing last week against the Niners. This week he had 8 carries for 67 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So, Kyler Murray's rushing numbers on the season through 2 games. He has 21 carries for 158 yards. He's averaging about 6 yards a pop, and he already has 3 rushing touchdowns. Sweets. Kenyon Drake, 20 carries, 86 yards, 2 receptions for 9, so nearly triple digits in yards for Kenyon Drake. DeAndre Hopkins, who had 150 yards last week against the Niners, had 8 catches this week for 68 and a touchdown, 9 targets. Andy Isabella, 2 receptions, 2 targets, so he made both of his catches for 67 yards. Christian Kirk, 2 receptions on 4 targets for 57. And then the legend himself, Larry Fitzgerald, extends his streak of consecutive games with at least 1 catch, as he was targeted 7 times and he made all 7 catches for 50 yards. Devontae Campbell led Arizona's defense with 8 tackles, 6 solo, and 2 passes defense. Jordan Hicks also had 8 tackles, 6 solo. For Washington, Dwayne Haskins Jr., the pride of Ohio State, 19 of 33, 57.6% of his passes completed, 223 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and an 88.3 passer rating. So he had the same passer rating as Kyler Murray. Only he didn't throw an interception. He also carried the ball once for 8 yards. Antonio Gibson, 13 carries, 55 yards, and a touchdown. J.D. McKissick, 8 carries, 53 yards. Scary Terry McLaurin. And yet, Scary Terry lived up to his name in this game. 7 receptions on 10 targets for 125 and a touchdown. Steven Sims Jr., 3 carries, 55 yards. Kevin Pierre-Louis had 10 tackles, 5 solo, 1 forced fumble to pace Washington's D. Jimmy Moreland had 6 tackles. John Bostic, 5 tackles, 3 solo, and 1 sack. Landon Collins, 5 tackles, 1 sack, 1 pass defense, and 1 interception. Right, the Arizona Cardinals offense ran 70 plays, finished with 438 yards, 278 passing, and 160 rushing. So the ground game is really running. Take that, critics. The Cardinals had 22 first downs, third down conversions, 7 of 17, 41.2%. Fourth downs a perfect 2 for 2. The defense had 47 tackles, 38 solo, with 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 passes defense, no interceptions. But the penalties, they really got to clean this up. Arizona was flagged 11 times for 97 yards. Time of possession was 33 minutes, 45 seconds. Washington ran 56 plays on offense and totaled 316 yards, 199 passing and 117 rushing. They had 19 first downs. Third down conversions were a struggle. 4 out of 12, 33.3%. Fourth downs, 1 for 1. Defense at 58 tackles, 49 solo, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 pass defense, 1 interception, and neither team had a defensive score in this game. The no-names were penalized 6 times for 42 yards. Time of possession was 26-15. Closing line was Arizona -7. Margin was 15 points. Over-under was 46. The two teams combined for 45, so they finished just 1 point below that total. Just 1. The offenses combined for 126 plays and 754 yards. I picked the Cardinals to win this game 28-17. Again, another score I nearly got correct. I had Arizona scoring 2 fewer points and Washington scoring 2 more points. But either way, a win's a win. I'll take it. That's 11-1 straight up. I also picked Arizona to cover the 7 points, which they do with ease, winning by 15. That makes me 5-7 against the spread in week 2. Alrighty, final page. The Baltimore Ravens, 3rd in my power rankings, fresh off of the 38-6 beatdown of the Cleveland Browns last week. They traveled to Houston to face Deshaun Watson and the Texans, who dropped the kickoff game to the Kansas City Chiefs 34-20. And some guy by the name of Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran all over them that night. The Texans came in at number 14 in my power rankings. Baltimore wins it 33-16 and stays perfect at 2-0 as they will host the aforementioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs next Monday night. And in the Houston Texans at 0-2 will travel to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers. So now you face Patrick Mahomes and lost. You face Lamar Jackson and lost. Now you have to go to Pittsburgh and play another proven quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. So yeah, things are not getting easy for Bill O'Brien and the Texans here in the early going. Lamar Jackson for the Ravens was 18-24, completing 75% of his passes for 204, with 1 touchdown and no interceptions, and a 113.9 passer rating. And in typical Lamar Jackson fashion, he ran the ball well as also 16 carries for 54 yards. Gus Edwards, 10 carries, 73 yards. Mark Ingram II, 9 carries, 55 yards, rushing touchdown, 2 receptions for 33. So nearly a 100-yard day for Ingram. J.K. Dobbins, the rookie running back from Ohio State, had 2 carries for 48 yards, 1 reception for 13. Marquise Brown, they call him Hollywood Brown in Baltimore. 5 receptions, 42 yards on 6 targets. Miles Boykin, 4 receptions, 38 yards. Rookie Patrick Queen from LSU paced the Raven defense with 7 tackles, 5 solo. Marlon Humphrey, 6 tackles, 5 solo, and a forced fumble. And Chuck Clark, 4 tackles, 2 solo, and both recorded half a sack in this game. For the Texans, Deshaun Watson, 25-36, completing 69.4% of his passes for 275 with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He closes the game with an 89.5 passer rating. Carried the ball as well 5 times for 17. Brandon Cooks, 5 receptions on 8 targets for 95 yards. David Johnson, 11 carries, 34 yards, 2 receptions for 16. Randall Cobb, who was signed by the Texans in free agency from the Dallas Cowboys. 5 receptions, 59 yards on 6 targets. Jordan Atkins, 7 catches, 7 targets, 55 yards. Zach Cunningham paced Houston's defense with 10 tackles, 5 solo tackles, and 1 sack. Justin Reed at 8 tackles, 6 solo. Ravens ran 61 offensive plays, finished with 407 yards, 177 passing, and a massive 230 rushing. Ravens have 23 first downs. Third down conversions were a bit of a struggle for Baltimore, 5 of 14, 35.7%. Fourth down conversions, not a struggle, 2 for 2. Defense, 42 tackles, 26 solo tackles, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 2 passes defense, and 1 interception. Those latter 2 categories both by Marcus Peters. Baltimore was flagged 3 times for 21 yards and 9 seconds away from them being official ball hawks in this game. Time of possession was 34 minutes and 51 seconds. The Houston Texans ran 53 offensive plays for 304 yards, 253 passing, but they were held to just 51 rushing. The Texans had 18 first downs. Third downs were also a struggle for them, 3 for 9, 33.3%, and 0 for 1 on fourth downs. So the Texans had a lot of issues on late down conversions. Defense had 45 tackles, 13 solo, 3 sacks, 2 of those coming from J.J. Watt. No forced fumbles, 3 passes defense, no interception, and no defensive touchdowns for either team. Although the Ravens did have the 1 pick from Marcus Peters. Houston was flagged for 22 yards. Houston was flagged 4 times for 22 yards. Time of possession was 25 minutes and 9 seconds. Closing line was Baltimore -7. Margin was 17. Over under at close 49.5. The two teams scored 49 points. So if either team scored just one more point, just one more, this game would have finished over the total. So they just missed it by that half points. The two offenses ran 114 plays and combined for 711 yards. Straight up, I picked Baltimore 37-21. Win this one, that's 12-1 straight up, and 6-7 against the spread, as the Ravens do in fact cover the 7 points, winning by 17. And then the final Sunday afternoon game of the week was the Kansas City Chiefs, number 1 in my power rankings after taking the Houston Texans to task in the kickoff game back on September 10th, winning that game 34-20. They visited SoFi Stadium for the Chargers home opener after LA escaped Cincinnati with a 16-13 win over the Bengals last week. And it looked like for a while that the champs were on the ropes. But in true champion form, Kansas City got off the mat and ended up winning this game in overtime 23-20. The defending Super Bowl champions are now 2-0 as they visit Baltimore and Lamar Jackson on Monday nights. While the 1-1 Chargers will host the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. Starting off with Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes was 27-47, completing 57.4% of his passes for 302 with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. He finishes with a 90.9 passer rating. And in typical Patrick Mahomes fashion, he also ran the ball well, 6 carries for 54 yards. The aforementioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the rookie running back from LSU, who ran roughshod over the Houston Texans in week 1, pretty much held in check by this Charger defense. 10 carries for 38 yards, 6 receptions for 32. Tyreek Hill, 5 catches, 99 yards on 11 targets. Just imagine, if he caught at least one more ball, he would have had triple digits in receiving yards. Hill also ran the ball once for 9 yards. Travis Kelce, 9 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown on 14 targets, meaning he was thrown to 14 times. Damian Wilson led KC's defense with 7 sacks, or 7 tackles, 2 solo. Well, 7 sacks by a player would be a record, I think. And then Anthony Hitchens, the one-time Dallas Cowboy, 7 tackles, 5 solo for the Chiefs. As for the LA Chargers, Justin Herbert, who was penciled in as the starting quarterback for Tyrod Taylor, who was ruled out during pregame after he took an injection to his ribs, looked pretty solid in his NFL debut. The rookie quarterback from UCLA and the number 6 overall player taken in the 2020 draft. He finished 22 of 33, 66.7% of his passes completed for 311 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception and a 94.4 passer rating. Herbert also had 4 carries for 18 yards and a rushing touchdown. Again, Tyrod Taylor did not play in this game. He's the normal starting quarterback for Los Angeles. They listed a chest injury as the reason why he didn't play. Austin Eckler, 16 carries, 93 yards, 4 receptions for 55 on 4 targets. So he had nearly 150 yards of offense in this game. The Chiefs could not stop this guy. Joshua Kelly, same deal. 23 carries, 64 yards, 2 receptions for 49. So those two running backs both had over 100 yards of offense. Keenan Allen, 7 catches, 10 targets, 96 yards. Hunter Henry, 6 catches, 8 targets, 83 yards. Jalen Guyton, 1 catch for 14 yards, and 1 was all he needed because that went for a touchdown. Desmond King II led the Charger defense with 6 tackles. Kazir White had 5 tackles, 1 solo. The Kansas City Chiefs had 414 yards of offense on 69 plays, 289 passing yards, and 125 rushing. They had 23 first downs, third down conversions 7 out of 15 for 46.7%, fourth downs 1 for 1. KC's defense had 53 tackles, 22 solo, with 2 sacks, no forced fumbles, 3 passes defensed, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. But the Chiefs were flagged quite a bit. Andy Reid cannot be happy about all these penalties their team got on Sunday. 11 in total, 490 yards. Time of possession was 28 minutes, 38 seconds. The LA Chargers ran 77 offensive plays and finished with 479 yards, 296 passing, and 183 rushing. So they pretty much ran at will on Kansas City's front 7. The Chargers had 28 first downs, 5 more than the Chiefs. Third downs were not a problem for them either. 6 for 13, 46.2%. Fourth downs, 1 for 2, 50%. Defense, 39 tackles, 10 solo, with 1 sack from Joey Bosa. No forced fumbles, 5 passes defensed, no interceptions, and no defensive touchdowns. LA was flagged 6 times for 40 yards. Time of possession, ball hawk territory. 39 minutes, 27 seconds. Closing line was KC -9. Margin was 3 points. Over under 46.5 at close. Total points 43. So this game finished under the total, even though this game went to overtime. Total yards 893. Offensive plays totaled 146. That's 77 for the Chargers and 69 by the Chiefs. All right. I picked Kansas City to win this one by 2 possessions, 35-20. That's my 13th win of the week, straight up. And I also had Kansas City covering the 9 points. While only winning by 3, I lose this pick. All right, Sunday Night Football. Hitting the 2 teams that met each other in Super Bowl 49. You got the New England Patriots ranked number 11 in my Week 2 power rankings, fresh off of last Sunday's win against the division rival Dolphins. They ventured west to the home of the 12th man, minus the 12th man in these circumstances, to face Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks, ranked number 4 in my power rankings for Week 2. Seattle did allow 3 Falcons to go over 100 yards receiving in their 38-25 win in Atlanta last week, but that didn't stop them, did it? No. And it sure didn't stop Seattle here. Oh, and I almost forgot. Russell Wilson only had 4 incompletions that entire game against the Falcons. All right, Seattle wins this one 35-30. They stay perfect at 2-0. Next Sunday, they will host Dak Prescott and the high-powered Dallas Cowboys, while the Patriots return to Foxborough to host the Las Vegas Raiders, and we'll tell you about their first game in Sin City right after we're done with this one. New England, by the way, is 1-1. All right, so the aforementioned Russell Wilson only had 4 incompletions last week against Atlanta. We'll add 7 more this week for Russell Wilson. 21 of 28, completing 75% of his passes for 288 yards, 5 touchdowns. 5. And he spread the wealth, throwing them to 5 different receivers. He also threw an interception, but a solid passer rating nonetheless at 132.1. Wilson also ran the ball 5 times for 39 yards. All right, Chris Carson. He's one of the 5 Seahawks to catch a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson on Sunday night. He had 3 receptions for 36 yards and that receiving touchdown, as well as 17 carries for 72 yards to anchor Seattle's ground attack. Carlos Hyde had 5 carries, 22 yards, and 2 receptions for 15. As for the other Seahawks that caught a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, 4 catches on 6 targets for 92 yards and a touchdown. Oh, I'm not done. Tyler Lockett, 7 catches, 8 targets for 67 yards and a touchdown. David Moore, 3 catches, 48 yards, and you guessed it, a TD. And Freddie Swain, 1 catch for 21 yards, and that 1 catch went for a score as well. Ugo Amadi led Seattle's defense with 8 tackles, while Jamal Adams, big pickup for Seattle in the offseason from the Jets, 6 tackles to solo 1 sack. As for the Pats, Cam Newton, a.k.a. Superman. Well, apparently the Seahawks are his kryptonite. 30 of 44, completing 68.2% of his passes, 397 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a 94.6 passer rating. Again, kryptonite. Carried the ball 11 times for 47 yards for 2 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, I got your kryptonite right here. Sony Michel, speaking of kryptonite, he was held in check. 7 carries, 19 yards. Rex Burkhead also held in check. 6 rushes for 2 yards, 4 catches for 47. Not held in check, however, was Julian Edelman. He went off. He didn't score a touchdown, but that's good. But with a stat line like this, 8 receptions for 179 on 11 targets, you don't need to score a damn touchdown. All right, Damiere Byrd, 6 receptions, 72 yards. N'Keal Harry, 8 receptions for 72. And then Jacob Johnson, the only Patriot to catch a touchdown in this game from Cam. 1 catch, 1 yard, 1 touchdown. Jonathan Jones led New England's defense with 7 tackles, while John Simon had 5 tackles to solo. Seahawks had 58 offensive plays, totaled 429 yards, 275 passing, and 154 rushing. The Hawks had 22 first downs, 3 of 7 on third down conversions at 42.8%, so they kind of had a bit of an issue converting their third downs. They had no fourth down attempts. The defense had 49 tackles, 33 solo, 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 3 passes defense, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. All right, and Pete Carroll's team was hit hard with the laundry. Seattle was flagged 9 times for 68 yards. Time of possession was 31 minutes and 19 seconds. As for the New England Patriots, they ran 69 offensive plays for 464 yards, 397 passing, and 67 rushing. First downs favored New England in this game. They had 29, 7 more than the Seahawks. Third downs, not an issue for the Patriots. 7 for 12, 58.3%. Fourth downs, also not an issue, 1 for 1. Defense at 42 tackles, 20 sacks, or 20 solo with 2 sacks, no forced fumbles, 1 pass defense. That coming from Devin McCourty. And a pick 6, an interception return for a touchdown, also by Devin McCourty. And McCourty picked off Russell Wilson on his second pass of the night and the Seahawks' third play from scrimmage. New England was penalized only twice for 12 yards, so they played a very clean game. Time of possession, 28 minutes, 41 seconds. Closing line was Seattle minus 4.5. Margin was 5. Over-under was 45 points. The two teams zoomed past it, scoring 65. Put up 893 yards over 127 offensive plays by the two teams. I picked Seattle to win this game 28-24 and to cover the 5 points, or in the closing line's case, 4.5. Either way, I won both those picks. And that brings us to Monday Night Football and the first NFL game ever in Las Vegas, as the Las Vegas Raiders, coming off of last Sunday's win in Carolina in a game that features 7 lead changes. Vegas wound up winning that game 34-30. They return home, or should I say they return to their new home, Allegiant Stadium, to host Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. Fresh off of their 34-23 win over Tampa Bay last week, but the win did come at a price, as last year's leading receiver Michael Thomas went out with a high ankle sprain. He did not even make the trip to Vegas for last night's game, or Monday night if you're watching this late. Anyway, the first ever game in Las Vegas goes to the home team as the Raiders down the Saints 34-24. Saints were number 2 in my power rankings and the Raiders were 16th. Vegas is off to their first 2-0 start since 2013, as they will now travel to Foxborough to face Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Well, Belichick better think of a game plan to stop this Raider offense, because they looked pretty good last night, especially in that second half. The Saints fall to 1-1. They will play on Sunday Night Football against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Should be a fun matchup there. All right, so let's start with the hometown Raiders. Derek Carr, 28-38, completing 73.7% of his passes for 282 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he did a solid job taking care of the football. And it pays off. His passer rating was 120.7. Also 3 carries for 3 yards for Derek Carr. Josh Jacobs. This man ran with a purpose last night. 27 carries, 88 yards. Also 3 receptions for 17. So he had a 100-yard game. Jalen Richard, 2 carries, 26 yards, and a touchdown. Now, Darren Waller went off also. Not like Julian Edelman against the Seahawks, but he went off either way. Listen to these numbers. 12 receptions, 103 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted by Derek Carr 16 times. Count them. 16. Bryan Edwards had 2 catches for 42. Hunter Renfrow, 3 catches for 37. Zay Jones, 1 catch for 15, and that 1 catch went for a score. And Alec Ingold is the answer to the trivia question I was about to ask. Who was the first Raider to score a touchdown in Las Vegas? I just gave it away. It's Alex Ingold. 2 receptions, 5 yards, and the first Raider touchdown in Las Vegas. All right. Damon Arnett led Vegas' defense with 7 tackles. Nicholas Morrow, 7 tackles, 1 pass defense, 1 interception, and LaMarcus Joyner had 6 tackles for the Raiders. Turn our attention now to the Saints. Drew Brees, 26-38, completes 68.4% of his passes, 312 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He had a 91.1 passer rating. Alvin Kamara, 13 carries, 79 yards, 2 rush touchdowns, I should say, and 9 catches for 95 yards. So a typical Alvin Kamara game. Over 100 yards all purpose on 22 total carries. Yeah, 174 yards total for Alvin Kamara. Latavius Murray, 3 carries, 14 yards. Traquan Smith, 5 receptions, 86 yards on 7 targets. Ty Montgomery, the wide receiver, converted into a running back, although he wears a wide receiver's number. 2 receptions, 25 yards. And again, Michael Thomas with the high ankle sprain, he did not play. Marcus Williams led New Orleans' defense with 7 tackles, 5 solo. Marshawn Lattimore had 6 tackles, 5 solo. Demario Davis, 5 tackles, 2 solo, 1 pass defense. And then Malcolm Jenkins, the veteran cornerback, 4 tackles, 1 solo, 1 sack, and 1 pass defense. The Las Vegas Raider offense at 375 yards ran 73 offensive plays, 259 passing yards, and 116 rushing. Raiders had 28 first downs and converted 10 of 17 on third down conversions for 58.8%, 2 for 2 on fourth down. The defense had 43 tackles, 39 solo, no sacks, no forced fumbles, 4 passes defense, 1 interception, and no defensive touchdowns. Vegas was only flagged 3 times for 13 yards, so they also played a virtually clean game. Time of possession, Ball Hawk territory, 36 minutes, 18 seconds. Third team this week to possess the ball at least 35 minutes. The Saints ran 57 offensive plays for 424 yards, 312 passing and 112 rushing. They had 26 first downs, 2 first downs fewer than Las Vegas. Third downs were no issue for New Orleans either. They were 7 for 11 for 63.6%. No fourth down attempts for the Saints. Defense at 49 tackles, 19 solo with 3 sacks, 0 forced fumbles, 3 passes defense, no interceptions, and no defensive touchdowns. But they got hit hard with the penalty flags. New Orleans was flagged 10 times for 129. Time of possession was a meager 23 minutes and 42 seconds. Closing line was New Orleans -4. Margin was 10 points. Over under at close, 47.5. Total points was 58, finishing over the total. The two teams combined to run 130 plays for 799 yards. Straight up, I took the Saints to win this 131-17, but apparently no Michael Thomas is a problem. So that's just my second loss of the week, which is awesome. However, it was my 9th loss against the spread because I also picked the Saints to cover the 4 points, which they don't, losing by 10. So, as for my picks, 14-2 this week in my straight up picks. That puts me at 26-6 overall, 81.3%. That's awesome. Against the spread, not so much. 7-9 this week. That's 43.8%. And for the year, I'm at 53.1%. 17-15. And now, the Week 3 power rankings as promised. Starting off at the bottom, where there's no changes with the bottom 2, as both New York teams remain in their spots. The Jets at number 32, and the Giants at number 31. Meanwhile, Jacksonville and Washington traded spots from last week. Washington moved down to number 30, while Jacksonville moved up to 29 despite the loss to Tennessee. They did play the Titans tough, so give them credit. The Carolina Panthers stationary at 28 for a third straight week. The Falcons, the Falcons who blew a 20-point lead in Dallas and lost 40-39, and you don't turn the ball over, yeah, you deserve to fall. They dropped 2 spots this week to 27, falling behind the Cincinnati Bengals, who actually moved up a spot to 26, despite Thursday night's Buckeye State loss to the Browns. The Miami Dolphins also inched up a spot after playing Buffalo tough. They're at 25. Detroit remains at 24 for a second straight week. Likewise for the Denver Broncos at 23. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles, they fall 3 spots to number 22. And that brings us to our biggest drop in this week's power rankings. And that's the Minnesota Vikings. After being thumped in Indianapolis, again, the Vikings fall 6 spots to number 21. I don't know why I wrote jump. That should be drop. Okay. Ow! I'm alright. Sorry about that. Hit my foot on my dresser. The Los Angeles Chargers are up 2 spots to number 20. Indianapolis Colts are also up 2 spots to 21. The second biggest drop in this week's power rankings goes to the Houston Texans, falling 4 spots down to 18. That's following their loss at home against Baltimore. All right, one of the 2 teams with the biggest jump in this week's power rankings is the Cleveland Browns, moving up 3 spots to number 17. The Bears, off to their first 2-0 start in 7 years, they're up 2 spots to 16. The Rams also followed suit, moving up 2 spots to 17. Meanwhile, the New England Patriots, following the 5-point loss in Seattle on Sunday night, they fall back to 14 after a 3-point drop. And then the other team with the biggest jump is the Las Vegas Raiders, also moving up 3 spots to 13. The Arizona Cardinals and Tampa Bay Buccaneers both inch up a spot to 12 and 11 respectively. And you got the same top 10, it's just in a different order. The Dallas Cowboys is one of 2 teams that maintain their ranking from last week at number 10. While the Buffalo Bills and Pittsburgh Steelers switch spots. Buffalo moved down a spot to 9, while Pittsburgh jumped in front of them to number 8. All right, the New Orleans Saints, who were shut down the second half against the Raiders last night, or again Monday night if you're watching this after tonight, they fell 5 spots down to number 7, so that means we have a new number 2 team. So they have the second biggest drop. Houston actually had the third biggest. The Tennessee Titans slipped out of the top 5 despite their win over Jacksonville. They fall to 6. The San Francisco 49ers and the Green Bay Packers both move up 2 spots to 5 and 4 respectively. And then you have your top 3. The Seattle Seahawks are at number 3, up 1 spot from last week. This week's new number 2 is the Baltimore Ravens, also moving up a spot, with the Kansas City Chiefs retaining number 1. Oh, and by the way, the Chiefs and Ravens next Monday night, that's number 1 versus number 2 in my power rankings. Huge. All right, so that was week 2 in the National Football League, the week that was. I'll be back either tomorrow or early Thursday for the week 3 review, as I'm about to get to work on that here. So again, if you like these football vids, Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell twice. Get notified every time I post a new video. Alright, this is Big Al signing off. I'm getting out of here because it's been about 2 hours since I started recording this. Anyway, have a great night, and I will talk to you either Wednesday, tomorrow, or Thursday. Alright, Big Al signing off. Peace out.